I want to get to... They're not a wealthy, but I want to get to the second... Not per head of the population. I want to get to the second and third points because they're a bit more counterintuitive. But very quickly, if you drive or take a bus from Cape Town International Airport to Cape Town, the poverty you see en route, and yet you've got plenty of wealth in South Africa. The poverty is extraordinary. Same in Mumbai if you do it in Mumbai. But there are two other reasons, other than doing the right thing, other than helping people who are poorer than us. That is trade. 2014 report showed that thousands of jobs, 12,000 UK jobs estimated to have been created because of our international aid budget, because for every dollar we give away or every pound we give away, our exports go up by something like 20%. So that's something that people don't often know about. The other reason is really important, is soft power. It helps us with our foreign policy. It helps us have influence on the world.
Do you think perhaps,
and to make our country more secure.
Perhaps we'd have had slightly more soft power if we hadn't created ourselves and made ourselves into a laughing stock on the international stage.
Well, we're not going to disagree on that. Don't start that, Nana. We'll agree. I'm not here to agree with you.
That's the thing. If we hadn't made ourselves a laughing stock, I don't believe that foreign aid, no amount of sort of bribery in terms of foreign aid.
I don't want to see it as bribery.
Well, I think it is.
If we help countries that are struggling, they're more likely to listen to us when we have concerns.
What about the corruption, though? Because we're really, a lot of the money, you're talking about some of the countries that you're saying on one side it's really wealthy, the other side, a lot of that aid doesn't receive...
I'm absolutely in favour of this stuff being properly audited, so that we do...
But it isn't
so that we do everything that we possibly can to make sure that the money that we, hard-earning taxpayers, spend actually goes where we want it to be spent. On that, I agree with you, of course. OK. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring in Henry Bolton. Let's see. Henry Bolton is the international security and border control expert. Henry, this foreign aid, do you think it should be cut? What's your view on it?
Nana, just to start off with, my qualifications for this, borders don't necessarily come into it. I've spent 23 years abroad working primarily for the British government on various projects, generally security related, but also good governance, and also advising governments on refugee crisis management. And I know very well what was just been talked about in relation to the poor, but the fact is that we are helping governments that are hugely wealthy, but keeping the wealth in their own hands rather than distributing it around the population. That's why we've got this discrepancy, and it's no good us building schools or hospitals or providing for the poor because we're not putting pressure on those governments. It's a get-off for those governments so they can get away with it. We don't need to build a school. The British ambassador's going to build a school. He's agreed to do it. And there is a great deal of mistargeting of that. My bottom line of this, Nana, is yes, there is scope for it. But a lot of people that I've heard ask for those cuts have also not really understood the breadth of the foreign aid budget. So, for example, our contributions are necessary to a large degree because we are a member of the Security Council. If we want to retain that and not encourage voices to take over our place, for example, the European Union has already been making those noises, well, we don't want to encourage that through influence. And a lot of the foreign aid budget actually goes to things such as our intelligence work abroad and so on. So there are some areas that really can't be cut. It's a complex business. But bottom line, yes, it can be cut. It must be much better targeted. And I would agree entirely, we need to be much more clever about how we spend it. I know for a fact, because when I was working for the Foreign Office, we did an audit, effectively a review. Some of us, we're not civil servants, we brought in from outside to give our opinion after a review of how or why aid that was being spent wasn't having the intended effect. Well, the reason is the people who were developing the projects and requesting the funding from the foreign aid budget to implement them had absolutely no training whatsoever in project design, project implementation, project management, or indeed in trying to report the results. So there's a massive failure. As far as I know, it's still not been addressed.
So what about it? So in your view, then, do you think it should be cut? Because obviously the targeting isn't great, and we're spending a lot of money. A lot of that is wasted. Do you think that we should cut that aid?
I think there is scope for cutting it, yes, Nana, but it needs to be. It's not simply cut the whole thing by 3% or 5% or whatever. It is simply that we've got to be clever about how we use it, and some of it can be trimmed. 3 years ago, I issued a paper that basically I said that it can be cut by about a third. I would review that now under present circumstances and the world conditions. I would say that now we could probably cut it by maybe a quarter, but I've not done the calculations recently. But there is scope for cutting it. But the most important thing is that we've got to stop spending it in countries like India and Pakistan, India and China particularly. China is causing a range of problems. Yes, it's got internal problems, but that's for the Chinese government to sort out. If they want to spend huge amounts on defence rather than their own people, then, frankly, that's a problem. When they're abusing human rights, why are we getting them off the hook by contributing funding?
Let's bring Matt into this conversation because Matt's also joining me in the studio. So, Matt, Henry points out places like China, India, Pakistan, who we're sending foreign aid to, but frankly, they shouldn't really be so. In my view, I don't think they should go there either. But, I mean, what do you think, Matt?
I think there's absolutely scope for making sure that the money that we spend is properly targeted and that we don't have civil servants. I'm not saying we do, but the temptation might be, given you've got a fixed 0.7% until it's recently been cut, it's supposed to be 0.7%. Oh, well, we'll just dump that because we've got to be a spare cash. We have to spend X billion pounds, so let's just put it over, let's not care about it. No, we have to be ruthless. The people in charge of that money have to be responsible and have to make sure it goes to the right places because people like all of us involved in this conversation, everyone watching, it's our hard-earned money. So I'm absolutely with you. In terms of China specifically, China clearly is a big bad wolf as far as we're concerned on the international stage. I do feel uncomfortable about sending money there, but it comes back to the second of my 3 points, or the third of my 3 points, which is our influence around the world. We do want to have influence in places like China. The question then is a country like Pakistan. I'm not a fan of the Pakistani government, but you said it's a rich country. It's not a rich country. If we are helping people on the ground in Pakistan, we have much better chance, again, of influencing their government for the better. If we say, let's cut it by 0.2% or let's make it 0.5% rather than 0.7%, why don't we just go down to 0%? We have to protect it because there is always a temptation to cut it completely.
Henry.
Matt, I think, in a sense, you're making a valid point. But what's really needed here, as it is across government in all areas, whether it's transport or defence or borders, is a proper, thought-through strategy with a clear vision, clear set of strategic goals, so that the people implementing it actually understand what they should be targeting and why. And everything they do, every project that's developed, needs to be justified against those strategic objectives. If we want to influence China, there needs to be a methodology, a framework under which that occurs. It shouldn't simply be the British ambassador, deputy ambassador, or somebody else from the embassy or wherever going to a reception, having a chat with the foreign minister or deputy foreign minister who says, oh, by the way, could you help out with this hospital, this school, or that project, or that road? And the British ambassador thinks, oh, I've got an opportunity now to influence the foreign minister or whatever minister he is. That's the reality of what happens in a lot of cases. And in fact, because of the poor training of many of our diplomats, their lack of experience now, unfortunately, since civil service reform and so on, the fact is that they don't have the gumption, the ground knowledge, if you like, the ground truth, to understand that they're being played in a variety of ways. I've seen this for 23 years and it's not changed.
Matt, what final response to that?
It's difficult to get into the detail of what particular ambassadors are doing. Of course, I can't speak for our ambassadors abroad. I don't have that sort of experience on the ground. What I would say is that you haven't yet addressed, Henry. It looks as though there's a bit more agreement perhaps than we expected, but you haven't addressed this point about trade. That according to this report in 2014, for every pound or every dollar that we contribute abroad, it actually has a really positive blowback here because our trade, our exports go up, and as a consequence of that, we create jobs. We create jobs for British people.
Very quickly, 20 seconds, and we're going to have to wrap this up, Henry.
Yeah, look, I mean, in certain cases, with certain countries, Republic of Northern Macedonia, I know it's had a positive effect on the trade with that country. Other countries, it doesn't. We're being played. And the thing is, we cannot rely on the expertise of our diplomats and so on to deal with that, or some of the NGOs. And frankly, I don't think we should be putting the foreign aid budget in the hands of other NGOs without monitoring very closely and much more closely what they're doing.
Henry Bolton, thank you very much. Henry Bolton, he's an international security and border expert. And also Matt Stavland, thank you very much, Matt, for joining me in the studio. Right, well, what's your view on that? Get in touch in the usual way. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with this great British debate. Now I'm asking, should foreign aid be cut? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and political commentator Albi Amonkona. Then don't forget at 5 o'clock, it's Difficult Conversations. An estimated 13 million women are menopausal in the UK, with many experiencing a variety of symptoms, including hot flushes, sweating and a lack of energy. I spoke to the UK's leading women's nutritionist, Dr. Marilyn Glenville, to find out more about the comprehensive approach to menopause.
I think it's wonderful that we're talking about the menopause now and talking about it in the open, and it's not a taboo subject. My concern is that it's being medicalised, that we're getting to the point now where we're seeing this as not as a natural stage for us as women. Like we went through puberty where those hormones increased, at the menopause they're decreasing, and we're almost saying nature's got this wrong and therefore they need to be replaced.
Well, that's on the way, but now it's time for your great latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's 4:35. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. A whistleblower has told GB News the government isn't acknowledging the true extent of a crisis at an asylum facility. The worker at the Manchester military base in Kent claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for up to 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation, but many have allegedly been living there in unsuitable conditions for weeks. Meanwhile, at least 12 small boats carrying about 500 people have been intercepted crossing the English Channel so far today. Authorities are still actively responding to other sightings. Border Force vessels and lifeboats are taking them to Dover. They'll then be transferred to the Manchester military base in Kent for processing. The parents of Chris Carber, a black man who was shot dead by police last month, have submitted a letter to Downing Street. They, along with other bereaved families whose relatives died in custody, are calling for the changes to the justice system. His family also wants an urgent meeting with the new Prime Minister, Home Secretary and Mayor of London. And Optus Energy will buy collapsed supplier Bulb, taking on its 1.5 million customers after the deal was given the green light by the government. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the move brings vital reassurance and energy security to customers. The sale's expected to be completed by the end of next month. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 40 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel. Now, back to our Great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should foreign aid be cut? What do you think? The Prime Minister is weighing up whether to freeze foreign aid spending at 0.5% of GDP for an additional 2 years in order to balance Britain's books and tackle high inflation. I mean, it is enshrined in law now, I think as David Cameron did that aid spending should be at 0.7% of GDP in line with the UN advice. However, the COVID pandemic meant that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, or the former Prime Minister, sorry, temporarily lowered it to 0.5% to take into account the huge cost of furlough. But any move to extend the cap by an additional 2 years is likely to lead to a bit of a backlash and lots of controversy. So what do you think, then, for the Great British debate this hour? I'm asking, should we cut foreign aid? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also political commentator Albi Abenkona. Lizzie, foreign aid. I mean, a lot of people saying it's great, it's good to show that our prowess in the world and that we are, you know, a power, and also to influence things. What's your view on it?
We have a multi-billion massive black hole. And I'm sorry, I think it's got to be cut. Rishi has the biggest job of any Prime Minister ever in his hands, and I'm afraid to say I think we've got to spend more at home than abroad. I mean, look at the minute that we're spending anyway. Look at what we're spending on the refugees. It's about 3 billion. It's going up all the time. I mean, even just a day is 4.7 million a day housing migrants in this country, and we've got so many problems. I'm sorry, Nana. For me, it's no. Look, the UK aid budget is around 11 billion. It's huge amounts of money. It's massive. And I'm sorry, but I think we really need to tackle the problems here at home. It's an emergency. There's a crisis here, and that's what we need to do.
Albie?
So I think it's an interesting topic, the international aid budget, because I partially agree with you, Lizzie. We should be, especially in the middle of a huge economic crisis where the Chancellor is going to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister both are going to have to be making some very difficult decisions about how they are going to fill this £50 billion black hole, which there allegedly is. They're looking at raising taxes, they're looking at making cuts to certain departments. They're going to be looking to make politically easy spending cuts. And I would argue that the international aid budget is probably quite a politically easy thing to cut. That is not to say it's not going to be controversial, but compared to cutting the health service, it's much easier to make the argument that we should keep the target at 0.5% for an extra 2 years rather than bring it back up to 0.7%. But then just to talk about the migrants, of course, one could make the argument that the international aid budget is going to parts of the world where these migrants are coming from and helping bring prosperity, security and safety to these parts of the world. So you could argue lessening the need for those people to actually want to leave and cross the channel in the first place. So it's a double-edged sword cutting this budget.
Look, we've got to look at how much we're giving to the Ukraine at the minute. Couldn't we do it as a defence sort of programme, put the foreign aid, because we're giving to the Ukraine to help the Ukrainians, we're housing the Ukrainians. Surely there's a way we could put a defence sort of programme so it's through defence, our foreign aid. I think there's an idea. The first order of any government is to look after its own people. Right? And that's energy, food, defence. We've got to look after ourselves. But we are giving, we want to help the Ukraine, but let's do it maybe set up a programme.
Yeah, but some people would argue that actually investing in those countries actually helps to stop the migration crisis. So, as Albie said, keeps them where they are because the money's been invested. And in reality, most people probably don't want to leave their own country if they could get what they want in there. Most people don't. I mean, look, people from Ukraine don't want to leave Ukraine. People from places, even like places like Ghana, which is lovely, if those places were in a good form, then they would be happy to stay. So there was the argument that by spending more, you keep people at bay, but it's not working, is it? It's just not working.
We've got 37,000 that are having to be housed. They can't find the housing. They're going into hotels. Now the hotels are running out. We have big problems in this country at the minute.
And also the money should ideally be spent on the citizens of this country first, before it goes out to other people.
Yeah, and I do think that is right. So I do think this is probably going to be something that we are going to hear in in the autumn statement on the November the 17th, I think it is probably likely that this cut down to 0.5% will be extended for another 2 years. You know, we are still one of actually the biggest givers of international aid in the world after the United States.
We gave China 68.4 million.
It doesn't always go to the right places, but look, I'm proud of this policy.
That is part of the problem. You see, Pakistan, China, India, it's like, well, why are you giving these countries money?
Exactly.
Spend it in this country. There's no point. China is considerably wealthier than us. India has its own space programme. I mean, why are we doing that? And as Henry said, there should be better management as to where the money's going when it goes to these countries, but we're not even doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, but I mean, how would you feel about projects in places of need like Afghanistan or Syria, and actually seeing that people are going to be suffering in those countries as a direct result of this budget being cut? I mean, how would you feel where the money is being put in the right places to see less girls going to school in those nations that we're cutting our budget?
But the money would be taken from those where it's going wrong. So where we're spending in giving China money, which I think is nonsense, to show our prowess to the rest of the world, they only need to look at our politics to be laughing at us. We're not going to fix it by giving them more money to make us look good. I think we need to also start reconsidering why the foreign aid, the reasons for foreign aid. The reason should be to help other countries less wealthy than ourselves. It shouldn't be to show how strong we are on the international stage, because that is a pointless waste.
I mean, when we've got children here at the minute, they're going to school because it's the only hot meal they're going to get of the day. It's quite staggering when you're giving China 68.4 million. I mean, we need it here.
Needless to say, I mean, international aid going to countries like China and also going to countries like India, where they have their own space programme, seems questionable. But where it's actually going to really deprived countries and helping women and girls go to school and have the tools that they need to survive, I think that is a good thing.
Well, we shall see. Let's see what our viewers think, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go over to now? Should we go over to Bristol?
Oh, I love Bristol.
I like it. It's got very nice to do there. A lot of animals. I wonder if Lee's one of the animals out there. Yeah, there it is. I do this to him all the time. Hello, Lee. You know. He knows it. Lee! Oh, I had to do that gag twice.
Hello, Nana.
Can't do it 3 times.
That's what do you the point of our relationship where you can say that I'm an animal from a zoo, which is... I feel
get away with it.
very
Lee,
at ease with you now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Lee, what do you think about this foreign aid business? A lot of the money seems to be going to some very spurious causes and places that don't appear to need it, yet we're still forking it out, and we think that 0.5% is a good amount. I think it should be cut further.
I agree. I mean, it is a nuanced answer. Like, firstly, just to give you my opinion on it in general, I do believe in the principle of foreign aid for a lot of the reasons that I think Albie said. You know, it makes me proud that we live in a country that can afford to help people around the world. You know, in some cases, it does make a real difference, like places in Afghanistan, you know, and it also contributes to the UK's soft power. And this is all very, very beneficial for us in the UK. But what is unacceptable is the waste. And in my humble opinion, some of the recipients of this aid, as already has been said, shouldn't be getting a penny. So, for example, like you've already said, India and China, they both have larger economies than the UK. India has a space programme, and yet we still give them aid. I appreciate we have actually reduced down the aid we give to China quite dramatically. And some of the money that we're currently giving them is actually going to global humanitarian joint global humanitarian issues, but we shouldn't still be giving China a penny of foreign aid. But the biggest issue I've got is with the arbitrary targets. This obviously leads to spending money for the sake of it, and it should be targeted. And also, we have real problems at home that are affecting millions of people at the moment. And under the circumstances, I think it's absolutely right that foreign aid is temporarily cut. And I think it's sensible of Rishi to extend it for another 2 years to 2026, 2027. The whole system is rubbish, and it just needs a complete overhaul and completely changing.
Lee Harris, very succinct. Thank you very much. I would agree with everything you just said there. Thank you very much, Lee. Good to talk to you. That is our great British voice, Lee Harris. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying with regard to foreign aid. Gary says foreign aid should not be cut. It should be cancelled completely. See, that was my thing was that just cut it completely. I'm half there with you, regardless of the cost of living crisis. Eddie, however, disagrees. He said, no, it is a really useful fund for poor countries that can be accessed to help them as and when they need it. I think you could do a different sort of fund there. Does it have to be foreign aid to 0.5% GDP? I agree with Lee when he talks about it being an arbitrary figure. 0.5%, it's like when the councils have a certain amount of spending, they'll make sure they spend it by potentially doing things they don't actually need to do.
Exactly.
Well, Steve said, yes, it should be cut and replaced by a disaster aid fund. That's it. That's what I think. Change the name. It shouldn't be foreign aid, a disaster fund, which it has been abused for too much in its current position, in its current condition. Absolutely. Thank you for your thoughts. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it's time for the Royal Roundup. And Royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio to give us the lowdown on Prince Harry's new book, Spare, and to find out what it means for the palace. That's after this.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, where have you been? This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app where you can pick up all of the shows. There is always something going on, though, in the Royal Household because it's Royal Roundup time. And this week is no different. Every Saturday, I always like to give you a bit of a rundown. So who better to delve into the royal family than royal biographer Angela Levin. She's here in the studio. Angela.
Hello. Hello.
So, Angela, first of all, I think we need to start with the spare heir.
Yes.
Spare. Prince Harry.
It's very interesting, actually, because they released today the different titles for the book as it goes around the world. So here in the UK, it's Spare. Outside of the UK, it's Leftovers and Neglected.
Oh, for goodness.
And there's another one, is In the Shadows.
In the Shadows.
Which actually is tragic, isn't it? That someone could actually allow a title like that on a book, and that represents what's inside it. It's really, really sad that Harry can't move forward at all. It's obvious from the title that he's going to go back to his resentments as a little boy, that his brother was going to get the crown. But, I mean, he told me, when I interviewed him for the biography, that his mother made every effort to make him feel wanted. and that she wouldn't let cameramen, for example, take pictures of just William unless it was like his birthday. Harry was always there. Invitations always had to have Harry. So she did her very best to make him feel right. Also said he had more freedom, he had more opportunities, and that sort of thing. And he was also incredibly close to his father. You know, after Diana died, he said, you know, he really made sure, he was grieving too, but he made sure we were looked after and protected. In 2017, he invited him to come with him when he was guest editor of the Today programme, and Charles called him darling boy, and he said, you know, well, Pa, I never used to listen to you, but now I think you know so much I can't, you know, hear enough. And yet he is obviously going to try to smash the royal family. The timing is appalling. King Charles is grieving, and it's before the coronation, but he's got to bring it out now. I mean, 40,000 words of
whinging, complete whinging. I mean, the problem I kind of have with this is that the fact that somebody is constantly going on, not realising, it's by the sounds of it, the fortunate position that he's actually in. I understand it must be tough being the one who's not the one who's in line with the throne, but you're still in the royal family. You've still got a pretty good life. And the fact that now you've left the royal family, you are saying what it's like to be the spare heir. Yeah, that's mildly interesting. But the problem we have with it is that the Queen has only just recently passed away.
Yeah.
And if you really feel this is a journey into healing, which is what he claimed it wasn't a journey, well, now he's found love and all this, he would understand that if you do things like this doesn't look like you're healed, and you're passing on this burden to others.
Yeah, but he wasn't treated like a spare.
Yeah.
He was incredibly popular, the most popular,
He was popular
next to the Queen, because he was mischievous, he was fun, he was very lively. William's got a much harder life because it's so demanding to be a king and to be an heir. So, you know, he's got what he wanted. He got freedom as much as he likes. He's got a woman he absolutely adores. He's got children. He's got 16 bathrooms. I mean, it's really astonishing that he can't see anything good despite having lots and lots of therapy.
Well, he's got to pay for it all, hasn't he, now? That's the problem. He's probably realised, and this is what I was saying in the monologue, that he's probably realised now, oh, hang on, things cost money in life, because I imagine as a royal, you probably don't really need to carry money around. Everything's done for you.
Yes.
You probably haven't got a real concept
Well, he had
of how...
30 million in the bank from his mother. She left him that, so money wasn't a problem. But if he is doing it purely for money, then it's absolutely more shocking.
Well, he must be.
Than he needs to. Well, I think it must be. But
You wouldn't do that normally, would you?
But he should have come to a border where he said, I'm not going further. I think you need to protect your family, even if you fall out with them. You don't want to tell the world all the nasty details of how people are, because no parent is perfect.
No.
And I wonder how his children are going to react to the fact that they've never known his father's family. You know,
It was such a shame. They really missed a trick there. I mean, in particular, Lilibet, who probably didn't get to spend much time with the Queen at all.
15 minutes.
And I reckon if I were Lilibet, as I grow older, I would be wanting to say, where's my pictures with Grandma? Where's my pictures with the Queen?
Yes.
You would want that.
But once they
So
understand what the monarchy is, they will think, well, why weren't they part of it? I imagine. We don't know. It depends what they're like. But I think you've got to be careful when you attack parents, when they're really not too bad and they do love you.
Yeah, they do.
They just make some mistakes. But then so do we all make mistakes.
We all make mistakes.
Yes.
Now, what about the Sussex's website? I hear something happened on there.
Yes, well, the
What's been
Sussex
going
refreshed their website and they stopped having anything about the royal family in it. Nothing about the Queen, not a phrase about how much they miss her or how sad her passing is, even though she's 96, what a wonderful woman she was. And there was nothing about the royal family whatsoever. It was always, you know, you can change who you are and move forward type of thing. They're entitled to do that a lot, but I think that they should actually, if they are happy to keep their titles and they seem to cling on to them, that you actually have something royal about the people who gave it to you and a bit of gratitude in there. You wouldn't know they had a royal family apart from their title.
you know, well, they're using everything they can to sort of push that out there. Now, what about the dilemma that Harry is facing? Because I hear that the Netflix, you know, having to accept the money now, he's in a bit of a bind, isn't he?
Well, he is, but I think he just closes his eyes to that. There is going to be a disclaimer, then there's not going to be a disclaimer. That, I don't think, has been sorted out. They're not going to listen to what he says. He doesn't have any power over it, and it's going to come out very, very soon. He told me that he didn't want it.
No, this is obviously for the Crown. This is for the Crown, yes.
This is the Crown. But you mean his joint... documentary with Meghan.
Oh, yes, of
course. Well, it is the first year, and it's leaning towards Meghan. It's Meghan and her first year of married life with Harry. And I think that this will give them another opportunity to behave in a difficult manner. And if you think you've got the Netflix, you've got the documentary at Netflix, you've got his book, it's going to feel like a tremendous long storm for the King and Camilla and William and Catherine, and I don't really think that it's something that they should allow to happen.
It is awful, isn't it? How do they do that to their family? Andrew Levin, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for keeping us updated. That, of course, is Andrew Levin. This is the Royal Roundup. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. More to come in the next hour. Good afternoon. If you just joined us, welcome on board. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are, of course, GB News, the People's Channel. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. And at the top of the hour, coming up, difficult conversations. I'll be speaking to the UK's leading nutritionist in women's health, Dr. Marilyn Glenville, to talk all things menopause. And, of course, coming up, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is there no climate emergency? What do you think? Do you believe there is? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. A whistleblower has told GB News the government isn't acknowledging the true extent of a crisis at an asylum facility. The worker at the Manston military base in Kent claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for up to 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation, but many have been allegedly living there in unsuitable conditions for weeks. Former Chief Immigration Officer Kevin Saunders says the problem lies with the legislation.
80% of people coming across the Channel are from Albania, and we do have legislation, of course, that we can remove them. However, and here's the problem, the people that advise these refugees are saying, just say to the UK authorities that you've been trafficked, because once you've said that, they can't remove you.
Meanwhile, at least 12 small boats carrying around 500 people have been intercepted crossing the English Channel today. Authorities are still actively responding to other sightings. The UK has rejected Russian claims that the Royal Navy was responsible for the Nord Stream gas pipeline explosions last month. The Ministry of Defence dismissed it as false claims of an epic scale, saying Moscow's trying to detract from its disastrous handling of the illegal invasion of Ukraine. It comes after Russia declared the end of its mobilisation campaign after reaching its target of 300,000 reservists. The head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into what he's called abhorrent allegations of sexual assault and harassment in the submarine service. Admiral Sir Ben Keyes says the behaviour will not be tolerated and is not a true reflection of what service life should be. He says anyone who's found culpable will be held accountable regardless of their rank or status. Octopus Energy will buy Collapse supplier Bulb after the deal was given the green light by the government. Octopus says it's paying the government above market value to take on the company's 1.5 million customers. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the move brings vital reassurance and energy security to consumers across the country at a time when they need it most. The deal is expected to be completed by the end of next month. A teenager has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of a university student in Manchester. Luke O'Connor was stabbed in the early hours of Wednesday morning and later died in hospital. A 19-year-old is being questioned by police. The parents of Chris Carber, a black man who was shot dead by police last month, have submitted a letter to Downing Street. They, along with other bereaved families whose relatives died in custody, are calling for changes to the justice system. His family also wants an urgent meeting with the new Prime Minister, Home Secretary and Mayor of London. Thousands of mothers have been demonstrating across the country demanding reforms to childcare. The Halloween-themed protest called the March of the Mummies is calling for urgent progress on women's rights. They say expensive childcare, along with poor maternity and paternity benefits, are pushing mothers out of the workforce and into poverty. They want the government to increase funding for the sector. Beth is a mum marching in central London.
Unfortunately, when I go back to work, I basically will be giving my entire salary over to my childcare costs. So essentially, it's not worth me going back to work. But I want to go back to work and I want to be part of the workforce and I love my job and I don't want to take a career break. But unfortunately, I will have peanuts to survive on, which is really difficult when you want to spend time with your daughter, do fun things, and there's just not enough money.
Just Stop Oil protesters have sparked public anger in South and West London.
Yes, other people agree with you, but you're causing an inconvenience to the public and it's not right.
Drivers took matters into their own hands, dragging demonstrators off 4 busy roads which were being blocked. The campaign group says more than 60 supporters caused traffic delays in their bid to get the government to halt all new oil and gas licences. More than half of them have been arrested. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Albi Amankona. Now, still to come in my difficult conversation today, an estimated 13 million women are menopausal in the UK, with many experiencing a variety of symptoms, including hot flushes, sweating, a lack of energy and the weakening of strength. I asked specialist Dr. Marilyn Glenville whether menopause is linked to osteoporosis.
Unfortunately, 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 can get osteoporosis. And I think it would be important to have something like a DEXA scan, which is a special kind of X-ray that looks at our bone density in a hip and spine. And again, it's like you doing this MOT with a blood test. It would be, okay, well, what's the bone density like at this age? And therefore, does somebody need to take extra action, like topping up their vitamin D if it's low, looking at calcium, magnesium, thinking about their exercise. Are they doing enough to keep their bones strong?
That is on the way, but for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you believe there is a climate emergency? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come under fire after confirming he won't be attending next month's COP27 climate summit in Egypt. Critics have accused him of not taking the issue seriously enough, and that's as a report claims that heat waves driven by climate change have cost the global economy $16 trillion since the 1990s. But others argue that the climate has always changed. So what is the fuss if it's continuing to change now? And is net zero a con? Get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So now it's time for difficult conversations. Roughly 13 million women up and down the country are currently going through menopause, which is a natural part of the ageing process. Now, while some women are lucky enough to sail through the process with no symptoms at all, Others will experience a lot of them, including night sweats, hot flushes, declining libido, lack of energy, brain fog, the list goes on. Now, the go-to treatment for the symptoms of menopause has always been HRT, which is a form of hormone therapy. But my next guest, Dr. Marilyn Glenville, believes in a more holistic approach to alleviate symptoms. Rather, in her opinion, women should consider focusing on improving their diets and taking nutritional supplements. I'm pleased to say that Dr. Marilyn Glenville, a leading nutritionist in women's health, joins me in the studio now. Marilyn, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me. So talk to me about how you started. Why did you start to get into sort of treating women's health conditions and problems?
Well, it started a long time. I've been in clinical practice now over 30 years, and I run the Glenville Nutrition Clinics. And I really got into premenstrual symptoms, first of all, where women get that Jekyll and Hyde symptoms about 7 or 10 days before the period actually comes. And oftentimes they might be prescribed antidepressants. And that's when I really looked into the nutritional aspect of the cycle. And that's gone on over the years for not only PMS, but PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, perimenopause and the menopause. So it's really how do we look at women's health holistically and get those hormones back in balance, no matter what age and stage that woman is in her life.
So was your menopause nice and comfortable and quite easy, or did you go through a lot of the symptoms?
Yeah, it was quite easy, actually. Well, obviously, because I already knew about what to do preparing. I think if a lot of women prepare in that perimenopause stage, where it's more the irritability, tension, maybe some of the brain fog that you mentioned, before the night sweats and the hot flushes hit, then actually the transition through the menopause is much easier. And I had my 70th birthday in August.
70? No!
So I'm really quite away now. But we can live 30 to 50 years past the menopause. So my aim with women is to help them have that quality and quantity of life for as long as possible with that, good memory, good energy, just feeling well in themselves. And that's really what we're aiming for.
Oh, I'm listening to you. Look at her, she looks fantastic. So there's a series of blood tests that people do. I did some with you, but the vitamin D test you said was quite important. Why is that important to have?
Yeah, well, we've always known it's important in terms of we need good amounts of vitamin D to absorb calcium, and it is a risk around the menopause. 1 in 2 women will get osteoporosis after the age of 50. But it's now this enormous amount of research on vitamin D in terms of type 2 diabetes, cancer, particularly looking at breast cancer, allergies in particular, anti-ageing. So the range of the vitamin D research has really expanded, and our body does not expect us to get much from our food. It's really in that manufacture through our skin, in the exposure to sunlight. So it's not a food source nutrient like most of our other vitamins and minerals are.
So in terms of menopause, then, do you think there's actually a lack of awareness of it? Because nobody really told me about it. I happen to know about it because, obviously, I'm old now. But, nobody told me when I was 15, 16. There was no education about it whatsoever.
No, and we never had the term perimenopause before. That's more of a new terminology. But I think it's really useful because the perimenopause can start in our 40s. Right. So it starts much earlier than a woman might think about. And I think, really, if we had more education around it, what we should be eating, how we look after ourselves, exercise, that use it or lose it around the menopause, thinking about our brain health, because unfortunately now Alzheimer's is our biggest killer as women. So we really want to think about our brain health and our memory as well as our physical health as well.
And HRT, this is the go-to usually, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And obviously for me, because I'm a nutritionist, I'm always looking at how do we get through this stage naturally. So I'm taking a different viewpoint on it. I know some women do really well on HRT and they come into the clinic because they want to add the nutrition on top of the HRT. But some women can't take it, history of breast cancer. Some women, such as my choice, was not to take it in the first place and to go through this transition and out the other side. I think my concern at the moment, it's almost that we're medicalising the menopause. And there was a good article in the British Medical Journal just a few months ago about saying that if we medicalise it and it's seen as almost a disease, women are expecting the worst. They're expecting to get negative symptoms around it, and they're suggesting that we need to frame it differently in order for some women to have a positive experience around it.
Well, Marilyn, I travelled to Tunbridge Wells for a consultation with Dr. Glenville following a blood test. Let's see what my results were like. So I'm here to see Dr. Marilyn Glenville. Now, she specialises in menopause. And the thing is, I've been going through some symptoms. I'm sort of the age now, you know. I had my first child at 46. I know, it was a mean feat. But, you know, thing is, I had the night sweats before that. Then they went away. Then I had some moods and things. I mean, I'm quite a moody person anyway, so I couldn't really put it all down to that. But then my teeth started crumbling. I mean, I can't actually tell whether I'm going through the menopause. So I'm here to find out. I've taken some blood tests. I've got to find out whether this is actually perimenopause or whether I'm going through the menopause itself.
Hello, Nana. Lovely to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes,
Nice
do leave your coat there.
Thank you very
and
much.
then do follow me in.
Thank you. Obviously, I think this is something that women, and obviously as you, because I know you don't just deal with menopause, but it is something that women should really be doing all the time. Like, I had to have the blood test first of all.
Yeah.
And then that will show you something about the stage of menopause that I'm in.
Yeah.
I took the bloods a couple of days ago. It took 48 hours to get the results. They've come to you.
I've got them.
What did those results
And you also
reveal?
completed a questionnaire for
That's
me,
right.
which was really useful to look at your goals, also what you're eating, stress levels, that sort of thing. So that was useful to get a picture. And you're right, I think all women should have, like you've done, almost an MOT around the menopause, because it is a transition. We're going through this stage and out the other side, and then it's finding out what are our hormones doing at this stage, looking at other things like vitamin D, also thyroid function, and it's just finding out where do we stand, are there things we need to take action with, do we need to add in any extra nutrients, just finding out our health, because we can live now 30 to 50 years past the menopause. So we want to live that.
That's handy.
With a really good quality and quantity of life. So your results are actually really good.
Oh, wow.
Your vitamin D was brilliant, and that's up at 97, and you want to maintain that. We're going to struggle mostly from October to March because of the weather and the darkness and everything, and our body does not expect us to get much from our food. It comes from that manufacture through our skin and the exposure to sunlight. We're not going to be managing that over the winter months, so you need to keep taking it. And I know you mentioned to me that your period stopped about 6 months ago, and we aren't really classified that we're in the postmenopause until we've gone 12 months with no cycle, and then we're actually at that postmenopausal stage. But even your FSH level at the moment is showing that you are in the menopause. It's 74.1, and it's called FSH, it's follicle stimulating hormone, and actually as we go through the menopause, literally we run out of eggs. That's what's happening. So this hormone FSH, which is produced by our pituitary, is stimulating the ovaries to try and produce eggs, but it can't, so it produces more FSH, and that's why this level goes up, and that's what we're seeing in your blood test. So your levels in terms of what's going on with your hormones is exactly where they should be for your age and stage. So yeah, you are definitely way into the menopause. You've done 6 months in, another 6 months, and you can tick that box and you're postmenopausal.
There's no more eggs left in the little packet. They're gone. No more children. Hallelujah. No,
Yeah.
Marilyn, thank you so much. It's been
You're
really
welcome,
good to
and
talk
I'm
to
glad you could come in and do these.
A few night sweats and things. If I add it all up, then I realised that I was probably going through something. But I'm sort of on the other side of it. So I think all women should actually go and get this done, find out, you know, where you are, at which stage. So, and especially if you're the partners as well, who are with women who are going through menopause and perimenopause and all those things, just to know how to deal with it. Seriously, I think it should be something that is on the NHS that we get just as a matter of course. Can't believe it. I've done the menopause. Everybody knows about it now. Everybody, hey everybody.
No secret now.
No secrets here on GB News. But anyway, so for me, it felt I didn't really notice that much, apart from a little bit of brain fog. So I sort of slightly got away with it. But if people aren't going to use HRT, which clearly I didn't because I didn't really know that was happening.
Yes.
I know you do some supplements and natural things. What are the main things that women should be doing?
Well, I would say, like we talked about, for you to have a multivitamin and mineral, take something that's actually designed for the menopause, that's got a bit of everything in there. It'll include the vitamin D, all the calcium, magnesium, the antioxidants that we need, because we're always trying to slow down that ageing process. We can't stop it, but we want to slow it down as much as possible. And also taking omega-3 fatty acids, really important. And that's important for that lubrication from the body inside out. And particularly for some women, their main symptom is actually the joint pains around the menopause, more even so than the hot flashes and the night sweats. And really good research on the omega-3 fatty acids on our memory. And particularly when you talked about brain fog. We really need that to keep our memory, our focus, our concentration really good through the menopause and out the other side.
And what about for the men, or the partners of people who are going through the menopause? Because it must be quite tough for them. They've got to, deal with the mood swings and all the other bits and pieces. Is there any help out there for them?
I don't think there is at the moment. I mean, obviously I give talks and often men will come along and that's really useful. I think the education around this, what's happening with the hormones, can really help men understand what their partner may be going through and how they support them through this stage. And the same with people at work as well, getting that information out there so men in the workplace, maybe line managers, will understand what the women are going through and how to support them and changes that they may be experiencing.
Well, I know you've written a book about it, so talk to me about the book.
Natural Solutions to Menopause. So it is talking about how we go through this stage comfortably, and all the nutrition side women can put through alongside HRT. So it's not HRT or nothing. It's really can be a combination. Or for those women who can't take HRT or don't want to, then they use the nutritional side. And there was a brilliant research only this month on women who had a diet rich in soya, 84% reduction in moderate to severe hot flushes. And that was in the journal Menopause, only this month. So if we get the dietary side right, it can really make a difference.
Well, we're running out of time, Marilyn, so if people want to find out more, I know you do talks and things like that, do you have a website that they can go to?
Yeah, so they'd go to glenvillenutrition.com and that gives all the information about how they can do tests like you do, look after themselves. And we work remotely at the moment, even though I'm normally in Harley Street in Kent. All of the teams working remotely, both here and in Ireland, so we can see anybody no matter where they are in the country.
Well, Dr. Marilyn Glenville, thank you very much for talking to us. It was really informative. And, of course, today is the last 2 days of Menopause Awareness Month, so it was very poignant that we should talk about this. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. That was Dr. Marilyn Glenville. She's a leading nutritionist in women's health. Now, coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, do you believe that there is actually a climate emergency? Now, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come under fire after confirming that he won't be attending the next month's COP27. I mean, we had 27 of them now. Honestly, not much has happened, does it, really? That's as a report reveals heat waves have driven by climate change have cost the global economy some $16 trillion over the last 30 years. But what do you think? Do you believe that there is a climate emergency? That's on the way after this break.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. Welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. If you've just joined us, where on earth have you been? Right, so we've got our Great British Debate, which is coming up in this hour. And I've got a lot of questions for you. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, of course, for our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you believe that there is a climate emergency? Now, Rishi Sunak confirmed that he will not attend the next month's COP27, sorry. So I'm going ahead of myself. There will be more of them, obviously. But it's a climate summit. It's going to be held in Egypt, and saying that his absence will allow him to focus on more pressing domestic issues. The UK will instead be represented by Environment Secretary Theresa Coffey and outgoing COP President Alok Sharma. However, this has led to opposition leaders to accuse Sunak of not taking the climate crisis seriously enough. They also cited the fact that the Climate Minister, Graham Stewart, has lost the right to attend Cabinet after downgrading the position. And this week, in the same week, it was reported by the Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, claimed that heat waves driven by climate change have cost the global economy $16 trillion since the 1990s. So is it still possible to argue that there is no climate emergency? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you believe there is a climate emergency? Or are there hidden, do you think there's a hidden agenda behind the push to net zero? I'm joined in the studio now by physicist and engineer Brian Catt. OK, so Brian, first of all, categorise why they are saying it is a climate emergency. What is it that is pushing the narrative that there's an actual emergency?
Well, the narrative is to control energy use in developed economies, because none of the undeveloped economies or the developing economies are actually required to follow any of this. China, which produces most of the emissions, doesn't have to do anything until 2030, when it may or may not do something about it. So the idea is that the Western economies should be depressed, repressed in terms of how their economies develop, in fact, pushed backwards by making their energy more rationed and expensive.
Yeah.
While the other nations move forward.
So are you saying there's a climate emergency in this country, but there is not a climate emergency in other countries?
There's no climate emergency. There's an energy emergency in this country, while the other countries are steaming ahead, developing their economies.
So whilst we are calling this a climate emergency, other countries aren't calling it a climate emergency, and there's just a few of us saying that. What's the general narrative? Is that what's happening?
Well, the point is that the climate emergency is claimed as the 1 degree of warming we've had since 1850, which was the coldest in 10,000 years, and is 2 degrees colder than the highest it's been during this interglacial period. So it isn't emergency at all. It's probably natural change, which is cyclical and happens every 1,000 years. All they're looking at is 50 years of it, where it happens to have been going up. And sooner or later, it'll go down again, and then it'll go up again, and it'll keep doing that for as long as, well, any of us are around that.
But they're saying that they spent, what is it, $16 trillion on this, the fact that we've been...
No, they haven't. I put it in here and I marked it up for you. It's your present for this. Reading for this.
Brian always brings me a present.
What they've said is the cost of whatever it is, droughts and bad weather in poor countries is been 16 trillion since 1990, which is what, 32 years. And they're attributing that to the climate emergency. Well, actually, no. It's attributable to whatever happened to the regional weather in those places during that time. And that could have been quite natural change. It's the attribution of change is the trick that they pull.
OK, well, let's have a chat to John Grant, then. He's a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change. He joins me now. John, firstly, why do you think that there is a climate emergency? John, why do you think there's a climate emergency? Because we're hearing there is. That's what they're telling us.
Yeah, I mean, we use the term they. I mean, we're talking about thousands of scientists that are, publishing data, looking at all the information that's coming in from satellites and all of our weather stations, and also analysing the chemistry of the atmosphere. So we know that the carbon dioxide that's building in our atmospheres from fossil fuels, and all of this is is physics that that's going to create a warming over time. And, and this has been recorded and it is accelerating. And we are at 1.2 as an average. And it's causing some measurable effects now. So, that 16 trillion is one number. We have experienced this summer. China was mentioned earlier by your guest. They have just coming out of the worst drought that is arguably one of the worst droughts that a country has ever experienced. They are concerned. You may try and trivialize them, as a big emitter, and they are, and they could do a lot better. Of course they could, but they are also concerned. I've talked to people in China, and they want to change. And the idea that their government is locked into this. They got a tiger by the tail of doing industrial activity, and they're producing our machinery and our hardware. And I'm totally okay with us bringing that back to the UK. We should be manufacturing our response to this climate change here in the UK, not over there where they are, using
Hang on, but you've talked about China and they're concerned. If they were concerned, they wouldn't be opening so many coal mines, would they? They wouldn't be doing that. Let's bring Brian Catt back in on this, because you've made a few points. I want Brian to come back on some of the points that he's made. Brian, well, he's pointed out that China and other countries are concerned.
Well, they're not concerned enough to do anything about it. They're building more coal-fired power stations than probably we had before we started shutting them down. It's not a problem. They will generate energy the way they need to generate it to maximise their economic progress. They're building nuclear, they're building coal-fired. I don't think they've got much gas. But the other 2 points are, you're talking about weather as if it were climate. Climate is a 30-year average. And the other thing is, what you said, I'm sorry, is false as regards the change. The change we see now is not different to the change that we saw during the Roman and medieval warm periods. It's a cyclic change, and it's quite likely net zero as far as the CO2 influence is concerned. There isn't any physics evidence. I am a physicist and I've looked at the science. There isn't any physics evidence that there is a significant change caused by carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's a very small effect.
John?
Right. Well, bringing in the Roman and the medieval warm period is a really underhand method that we're familiar now with those periods, and those were localized warming areas. You looked at the planet as a whole; it did not warm in those periods. It just didn't. And if you were to use the localized argument, I could say that the world's warming 3 or 4 degrees now because the Arctic is 3 or 4 degrees. I would not do that because that's academically unreasonable. We have to look at an average. You don't cherry pick, which is what has been going on here. The average here is an ongoing warming, and it is causing. Seriously, the world's on fire. It's drought.
He said the world's on fire. But he said the world's on fire, Brian.
Well, the world's on fire because it's 1-point-something degrees warmer than the coldest it's been in 10,000 years, and it's 2 degrees colder than the warmest in that. But it is absolutely nonsense. I invite any of your listeners today to go away and look for papers on the medieval warm period or the Roman warm period, and you will find in geology it's incredibly well written up. There are artefacts appearing from underneath glaciers which are datable to the medieval and the Roman periods. Now, how did they get there? It's just, and it's also written up in the historical records that these periods occur.
It was local. It was local.
It's absolutely not.
Let him respond. He can respond.
The rest of the world was significantly cooler. You just can't go. It was really warm in Europe, and the glaciers around the northern Italy and everything were warmer. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Okay, but if you look at the world as a whole, and if you look at the world as a whole now, we are heading towards something that is something we can't pull back from. And this idea that, it's going to be really difficult to transition from this, we could create a better situation. This idea that our economy is being retarded by leaving fossil fuels in the ground. Surely people listening here can have seen how we've been gouged with regards to the cost of fuel and energy, and how we wouldn't be if our homes didn't any energy and we collected energy from renewables.
Well, listen, John, we're running out of time. It's so good to talk to you both. John Grant, thank you very much, Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Construction and Climate Change. And Brian Catt, I'm going to quickly come to you, Brian, very, very briefly. So, in your view, do you think there's a climate emergency? Just yes or no? No. All right, well, I think John would differ. He's got some paper for me. He's always got paper for me. If you just join me, welcome on board 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, coming up, I'll be continuing with the Great British Debate. I'm asking, do you believe there is a climate emergency? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcast from columnist Lizzie Cundy and also political commentator Albi Amankona. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's 5:33. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. The UK has accused Russia of making false claims of an epic scale after it blamed the Royal Navy for last month's Nord Stream gas explosions. Without providing any evidence, Moscow claimed a British unit blew up the gas pipelines. The Ministry of Defence says Russia's trying to detract from its disastrous handling of the illegal invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia has now halted Black Sea grain exports after claiming its fleet in Crimea was targeted in a Ukrainian drone attack. A whistleblower has told GB News the government isn't acknowledging the true extent of a crisis at an asylum facility. The worker at the Manston military base in Kent claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for up to 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation. But many have allegedly been living there in unsuitable conditions for weeks. Octopus Energy will buy collapsed supplier Bulb, taking on its 1.5 million customers after the deal was given the green light by the government. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the move brings vital reassurance and energy security to consumers. The sale is expected to be completed by the end of next month. And thousands of mothers have been demonstrating across the country demanding reforms to childcare. The Halloween-themed protest, dubbed the March of the Mummies, is calling for urgent progress on women's rights. They say expensive childcare, along with poor maternity and paternity benefits, are pushing mothers out of the workforce and into poverty. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Nana's back in a moment.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget, of course, you can stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. Now, back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you believe that there is a climate emergency? Rishi Sunak confirmed that he will not attend next month's COP27 climate summit in Egypt, saying that his absence will allow him to focus on more pressing domestic issues. Now, the UK will be instead represented by other members of the Cabinet. That's as a report by Dartmouth College reveals that climate change has cost the global economy $16 trillion since the 1990s. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you believe that there is actually a climate emergency? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Albie Amankona and also Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, I'm going to start with you with regard to climate change. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about it, net zero, this whole move towards there. Apparently, we're all going to go to hell in a handcart. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I remember Al Gore. Do you remember Al Gore?
I remember Al Gore. He's popped
And he said, oh, my God, the ice caps are melting by 2014. You've got 24 hours, all fear, you know, Project Fear. No, I don't think there's an emergency. You know, and I've said before, we've got 1% of the carbon emissions. Others, I think we should concentrate on convincing other countries like China, like the USA, like India, who are far, far higher in the, you know, 29%, 30s than us. And I know Rishi isn't going to the COP, which, do you know what COP means? Conference of Parties. He's not going to. They would like to show off. They would like to show off.
I knew that. I'll let you answer that.
You know, and I think this may be. No, net zero might be on his agenda not to be done. Maybe he's thinking that. I don't know, but I do think he should let King Charles go instead.
Yeah, I think he should as well.
I really do,
I
because
think so.
It's passionate. He's passionate about the topic. He's always gone on about it, and he'd like to go. So why not let old Charlie boy go? I
don't know. Maybe he's thinking he shouldn't go. Albie, what do you think? Do you think there's a climate emergency?
I think whether you want to call it a climate emergency...
That's what they're calling it.
Well, whether you want to call it a climate emergency or not, I think the evidence is undeniable that our natural environment is changing.
Well, no, you say the natural environment would always change.
Well, if I just give you some points. So if we're thinking about the UK, for example, our flying insect population has decreased by 60% in the last 20 years. Rainfall this year is 27% down, according to Thames Water.
What was the first statistic you said?
Flying insect population has declined by 60% in 20 years. The UK, according to Michael Gove, is about 30 or 40 years away from having real harvest problems because of soil fertility. We know that fossil fuels are running out. And so I don't think we can say there's no need to change the way that we are living. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, let's live more sustainably. Let's conserve our natural resources so that we leave the world in a better place for our children and grandchildren than we inherited it in. I don't think that is an unnoble aim. I think that's a good thing.
But nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that you don't want to leave something better than you did. But then to come up with there's a climate emergency, the world's going to end, which is how it is coming across, and saying that CO2 is to blame, where there are other scientists who don't think that, and then changing the whole environment to go to net zero, which could end up being more catastrophic for the environment than we imagine. For example, pushing people to electric cars. Well, OK, you've got lithium, you've got cobalt, you've got batteries that don't last for very long. You're going to create more electricity. Currently, you're buying the electricity and taking electricity from fossil fuel anyway to do these things, getting rid of cars that work perfectly well, instead of potentially harnessing their engines and changing it so you can use all these things. Just in my view, listening to I agree with leaving the planet in a better place, but that is environmental. I'm talking about climate. I'm talking about, you know, whether there is a climate emergency. There's an environmental catastrophe because we're, you know, putting plastic in the oceans. We are not looking after the environment. I agree with that. But climate change is different, and that's what I'm saying. The planet is always changing in climate.
And we all
whether
want
it's
cleaner
emergency
air,
or
don't we? We've only got one planet.
Yeah.
There's not another planet to go to.
there might be.
Though there could
We
well
can't
be,
get there.
actually. But look, we all want cleaner air. But let's be honest, why can't they do this conference on Zoom? I mean, obviously, they'll be taking planes in left, right and centre. That's not exactly helping the climate, is it?
No, but I mean, on air quality, and just to bring that back into what you were just talking about with electric cars, of course, we see much higher rates of childhood asthma, for example, in London because of poor air quality in certain parts of the country, especially near main roads, for example. So electric cars, it's not just something which is environmentally friendly, it actually helps with people's respiratory health as well. My point is...
Before you move on, but on that, though, they told us to go for diesel, because that was supposed to be better for the environment, and they realised that that was the spawn of Satan. I mean, look, they've come up with all these different things and realised that they're being wrong, and they're being wrong constantly. Why should we believe them this time?
Well, I don't think we can say it's wrong that electric cars won't help with people's respiratory health if they live near a polluted main road.
Where you're offsetting the carbon, there, doesn't it? If you are making the fossil fuel somewhere else but bringing it here, then you've shifted the pollution from at source, haven't you? So the pollution is now at source. But where you've got the car, there's no pollution. You see, so that's the thing. So I'm not.
But
I don't
we're
mind.
only 1% carbon emissions, and why hurt our own economy? Do you see what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
But I don't think net zero has to hurt our own economy. And if you speak to Ben Houchen, the mayor of Teesside, he will talk about how much investment has gone into that region with hydrogen energy and with things like building wind turbines to go out at sea. Net zero and the green agenda doesn't have to mean less economic growth. There's a lot of economic opportunity in this area, and also it helps us live more sustainably and we have a better natural environment.
Well,
as an
the deadline of 2030.
Nobody's really arguing that. The question is whether there's a climate emergency or not. I mean, remember what they said about the coral reefs? Oh, they're going to be gone in 30 years. They're I think it's 2/3 bigger than they were before. It's regenerated in a different way. You mentioned the insects. Yeah, as far as we know, but who's to say that it won't suddenly change differently and the climate balances itself out? As Brian Catt was saying, it goes through cycles, and we're on another one of the cycles. What are we doing this for? 50 years where we've been looking at the change? I don't think we really know.
I think we're all getting overexcited, and there's no emergency. I'm sorry, and why have we got to have this deadline, 2030?
Do none of those statistics concern you about the insects declined by 60% in 20 years?
No.
The fact that rainfall is down 27%, there's still a hosepipe ban ongoing at the moment, that we might have a real problem with soil fertility in Britain in the next 30 to 40 years, so it'll be harder for us to grow food. Do none of those things concern you?
To be honest with you, not particularly. I don't mean to be funny, but they don't. Because these things, the planet is a growing organism, and it will evolve to suit itself. It needs to live. So that is how it goes. I don't believe that I can change the way the planet is. I just don't believe that mankind has the kind of power to change that. We can potentially improve the environment for ourselves. So, for example, if you do swap to diesel because of the toxic chemicals that are coming out of it, but you could use other fuels that are less toxic or non-toxic or whatever. But I'm not buying into the fact that we have that much control when I think it's 97% of carbon dioxide is made by the planet. We create something like 0.000 something percent of it from our emissions and everything else. So I'm struggling to imagine that a planet of this scale could be affected by that tiny thing that we're emitting, when the majority, and overwhelmingly 97-something% is produced naturally from the planet itself.
And net zero is costing us too much. Look at what's going on in the economy. You know, Rishi's got this big black hole, multi-million-pound black hole to fill. Do you think really net zero is really urgent and an emergency?
Look, it's not the most urgent thing right now, but net zero is not until 2050. There's still a very long time until we reach that target.
Not unless Keir Starmer gets it.
And actually, let's hope and pray that doesn't happen, Nana. But the point is that net zero as a policy is something which is actually, when you do polling, a very popular policy with large parts of the population. So I'd be very surprised if we see that actually going away from the Conservative Party manifesto. I mean, if you look at most polling on net zero by 2050 as a policy, you will see broadly a coalition in favour of that policy by 2050.
But can I say this very quickly? There's Keir Starmer giving Rishi a load of grief for not going to this conference. Do you realise that we're in a high cost of living? It would cost actually Rishi £2,000 a night to go. He's got also
He
got
shouldn't
to
go.
take
Take
a jet, which is also not great for the climate. Keir Starmer, you know, he's great at giving advice when he's responsible for absolutely nothing.
So very briefly then, is there a climate emergency, do you think? Yes or no?
I don't really care what we call it, but there is something we need to do about our changing natural environment.
calling it a climate emergency.
No, there is not.
No. So you're sitting on the fence. You don't want to say there is.
You're like his Starmer. Sit on the fence anymore. You get
You'll be Captain Hindsight. I told you so there was. Right, well, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome on our Great British Voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. And today I'm joined by only 3 of my Great British Voices. Some of them ran away. Let's start with Brian Dugan in Edinburgh. Brian Dugan, do you believe there is a climate emergency, Brian?
I hate to take an opposite view to you, Nana, but I agree in terms of the use of the word emergency. It might be a little bit extreme, but I think it's dangerous to suggest that that there is not climate change and that is potentially not a real problem for the planet.
No. What I'm saying is the climate will change anyway, and I'm saying I don't know how much power we have to control it. That's my point. Sorry, Karen.
Well, what I wanted to quote from Nana, just to be helpful in terms of the conversation, was from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, that has been set up by the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme. And they were very categoric in terms of their conclusions, formed in 2013, almost 10 years ago. The report was categorical, saying climate change is real, and human activities, largely the release of polluting gases from burning fossil fuel, coal, oil and gases, is the main cause. And I think we absolutely, of course, through the history of the planet, there has been cycles and all the rest, but cause is at the root of this, and we are causing change to the climate, no question.
Okay, well, I beg to disagree that we're the main factor, but let's go to Mike Donovan. Mike.
Hi,
Nana,
how are you?
Yeah.
I think we must separate out climate change from environmental damage that's taken place. And we hear a lot about the pollinators. They've been killed by other factors than increased climate. Chemicals plus EMF radiation, a lot of our pollinators have... But climate change, I think the politics have overtaken the science here. Huge amounts of money has been driven into this. And there's an agenda behind it. And really what we should have is open debate, proper open discussion. I saw the 2 people on your panel tonight, and that's, open debate is actually allowing both points of view to come across. There are a lot of people who think climate change is a hoax that's driving a lot of the, if you like, global capital that's supporting it.
So finally, briefly, Mike, so in your view, is there a climate emergency, yes or no?
I think we have environmental issues, serious ones.
No, yes or no?
No.
No, right, OK, let's go to Jess then. Jess, final word to you. Jess, you've got about 30 seconds. He's taken up all your time.
Great. I think the term climate emergency is very loaded, and I think we have to measure, is it severe enough for families to be impacted by this, because that's the effect of environmental policy. Families will have to choose between heating or eating. I think there are environmental issues, some caused by natural causes, some caused by human causes, but I think the term emergency is so loaded, so we have to consider the implications of that. I think by saying there's a climate emergency, we're appealing to people like Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion. Do we really want to side with them type of people?
Good. Nice ending, Jess. Thank you very much. That's Jess Gill, Brian Dugan and Mike Donovan. Thank you so much for joining me. Wow, so there is no climate emergency, yes or no? I'd love to hear your views, but we'll move on briefly to another story that caught my eye. Now, findings show state school pupils are more likely than private school peers to get to University of Cambridge for the first time ever. Headmasters and the chairman of the conference questioned the fairness of the system. The university denies any form of discrimination. So what do you think? Should public school pupils, do you think they're being unfairly treated? Let's see what my panel make of that. Albie and also the lovely Lizzie Cundy. Albie, very briefly, because we've got to play the quiz.
I think that if people from state schools are getting the grades they need to get into Oxford or Cambridge, then they should be given the same opportunities as people from private schools.
Yeah, everyone should have the same opportunity. And if you're bright, really just, let them excel.
Interesting. I think they shouldn't unfairly weight things in any direction at all. And if they're doing that to people in private schools, I think it's wrong. Should be equal. Right. Let's move on then, because it's time, of course, for the quickfire quiz. It's the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories hitting the headlines. Right, Lizzie, let's hear your buzzer. And Albie, yours. Remember, do not buzz in, otherwise you'll be electrified and boosted off your chair. Right, let's start with this one then. Right, controversial billionaire Elon Musk made waves this week when he finalised a deal to buy Twitter and fired a number of the top executives. But how much did he pay for the website in the end? Was it 33 billion? Was it B, 44 billion? Or C, 55 billion? Albie.
44 billion?
44 billion. Do you have an answer?
It was 44, I know it is.
You do know it was 44 billion. It was indeed, yes. The billionaire has since stated Twitter can be a space for free speech. Thank goodness, once again, in this dramatic shake-up. Let's see. Are you happy that he bought that?
Oh, I'm so excited. I loved it that he went into the Twitter headquarters with a sink. It's like, has it sunk in?
Albie, are you pleased with that?
I just like to see capitalism working. It goes to the highest bidder, and that was Elon Musk.
Fabulous. Right, next question. A poll was commissioned that asked Boris which celebrity that they voted for to become Prime Minister. But who came top of the list? Was it A, Sir Trevor McDonald? Was it B, Martin Lewis? Or C, Dame Judi Dench? Oh, I don't know. I'll give that to... Was it Lizzie or Albie?
Martin Lewis.
It was you, Lizzie. I'll let you have that. She said Martin Lewis. Let's see if you're right. Yes, it was Martin Lewis. The poll of 2,000 adults found 44% wouldn't mind having a famous face running the country as long as they were honest, trustworthy, but also down to earth with a sense of humour. National Trevor David Attenborough came in close second of the top 30. Ricky Gervais, Dame Judi Dench, and England football manager Gareth Southgate also made the list. Oh,
yeah, my son works for Martin Lewis.
Is it? Well, one of my very good friends. Well, she's not very good, actually. I'm lying, but I know her from. She was quite. I was about to do that, and I thought, I don't know. But she used to be my assistant. I've been on TV. Lara Lewington. She married him. She's married him. Right. Anyway, let's move on. Lara, obviously we're friends, but not really good friends. But anyway, move on. Question number 3. Yesterday, the singer Terry Lee Lewis passed away with his wife of 10 years by his side. But before Judith, how many wives did he have? Just get a guess. Yes.
4.
OK.
I don't know.
Press your buzzer first.
6.
6. Ooh, like Henry VIII. Let's have a look. No, you married 7. You're the closest.
Do I win because I was the closest?
I hope somebody's keeping the tab of the scores here. And the British Veterinary Association. Next question. The British Veterinary Association has warned others about dressing up their pets in Halloween costumes, citing that it can cause breathing issues in many household animals. Which dog breeds were they concerned about? Was it terriers and Labradors? Was it French bulldogs and pugs? Or was it Sea Spaniels and Albie?
B. French bulldogs and pugs.
Yeah. Let's see. Are you right? I don't know. Vets warn snouts of certain breeds may suffocate. Let's see. What's the answer? What's the answer? Hello? You were right.
We'll say you're right. You are right.
Nothing on
they have trouble breathing.
Heads will roll about
this.
Do. Yes, you were right if you said that. And who said that? You got that right.
I did.
Well, I actually...
No, you didn't, Lizzie. It was Albie. A Ukrainian refugee reported to British hosts modern-day slavery after they made her do household chores. But what activity did they force her to complete? Was it A, walking the dog, B, cutting the grass, or C, washing the dishes? None of them were that bad. Who was first? Was that you?
Give it to Lizzie.
Got
well, I'm going for washing the dishes.
Washing the dishes. What do you think, Albie?
Do people cut the grass at this time of year? I'll go for cutting the grass.
It was washing the dishes, of course. Washing the dishes, that's no big deal. Unless, of course, they had a restaurant. The woman claimed she was like a slave after the host family made her wash the dishes. I get my daughter to do that. Did you get any of your family members to wash dishes when we didn't have dishwashers?
Yeah, of course. My mum used to always make me do it.
We do chores, dishes, washing, cleaning the bathroom.
My mum said, no, I'm a part of chore. That means
we had to work for our pocket money.
Washing the dishes, please, in her accent. I mean, like, I understood that. Right, well, on today's show, we've been asking, given the cost of living crisis, should foreign aid be cut? And according to our Twitter poll, 88% say yes. Woohoo, you're right. Yes. 11.5% of you say no. Huge thank you to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you very much. And also political commentator Albie Amon-Comer. Thank you very much. And also, as ever, thank you to you at home for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 to discuss the top stories with Christine Hamilton and also Peter Edwards. I'll see you there. Be there or be square. And also, don't forget, Danny Johnson will be here in Outside. Do not miss it. I'll leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet at times, and some rain pushes northwards, though drier further south. Let's look at the details. Starting off in the southwest, and here it should be a largely dry end to the day. A few showers are possible, but many will have clear skies to start the night. Also mostly dry in the southeast with clear spells after an exceptionally warm day. It will be a very mild evening, though brisk winds. A few showers are possible across Wales, and here some low clouds may lead to